Salut tout le monde and welcome to my atelier. Today we'll be discussing 12th and 13th century French literature. I hope you brought your pencils. Just kidding. Anyway, we will be discussing 12th and 13th century French literature because that's what I just spent a whole semester reading. Yay. More specifically, of course, I was just reading the Lais, which are a type of troubadour poetry that was written down, and this is all of it, basically. It deals with a lot of Celtic symbols because they were originally memorized, so they relied on the same tropes over and over again, and it's written in rhyming octosyllabic verses, which doesn't even translate into the modern French, so there's no way I can give you a rendition, but it looks cool when you see it. I can't read it either, so don't worry. But most of them were written down by Marie de France, who was an abbess in England, actually. The French she writes in was spoken in England because back in the day, England had been conquered by the French like 200 years before, and so they were still speaking French. But anyway, moving right along, we're going to talk about some common tropes, because tropes are so much fun, no matter what time period we're in. So, start with, forget what you thought about chivalry and all that stuff. Yes, it was there, but the main point of these stories is that everyone and their brother and their sister and their niece had a lover, and in most of these stories, that lover is a fairy. Think like elves, like Tolkien elves. It's kind of like that. They're both blonde like that and tall. So, yeah. All the fairies are blonde. That's one way to tell a fairy. In fact, one whole trope is the bad marriage. This happens when a younger woman of a high birth, of course, because these are not stories about peasants, let's be real. A woman of high birth is married to a man of high birth, and he's old and jealous, but very powerful, and he decides to lock her in a tower forever, basically. And then eventually a male fairy will find his way to her. In one of them, he transforms into a giant bird and flies in. But the moral of these stories is no matter what, they will find a way to cheat on you. Don't even bother. The next topic is someone is always gonna fuck shit up. The basic structure of these stories is everything is great at the beginning, and then someone does something wrong, something they're not supposed to, and then everything goes wrong. Which is basically the premise of every story ever, I know, but it's really repetitive when you read this many of them in a row. My favorite are the ones where a knight gets a fairy lover who's the most majestic, amazing woman in the world, and he, of course, just meets her in the forest because that's where you find amazing people. And she says, okay, we can be together as long as you never tell anyone anything. And then he does something stupid, like not say the queen is the prettiest woman in the world, and everything goes to hell because she disappears forever because he wasn't supposed to talk about it. First rule of doing it with a fairy, don't talk about doing it with a fairy. Now, since it was the Middle Ages, women were not particularly anything in these novels. Yes, most of these stories are about a relationship between a man and a woman, but the woman is named in one out of about 20 stories. And that's because he had two wives, so they needed to differentiate between the two. And their names were only different by an added 2 letters. So, female characters, they're not really important as long as they're beautiful. Good thing that's not true anymore. Nothing goes with literature like some good mint tea. How you go about meeting a fairy in the Middle Ages is oftentimes you go into the forest, and then you come to some water, and then you have to cross the water, or they cross the water, but there's something to do with water. And on the other side of this water is the other world where the fairies live, and they were always gorgeous and had powers that did not exist in the real world, and had really white hair. Middle Ages was big on thinking white hair was great and red hair was, you know, witchcraft. So I would have done well. Yeah, so when my teacher first explained that trope to us, my first thought was Daenerys Targaryen is a Breton fairy. So there you go. Brings a whole new level of something to Game of Thrones. I don't know. There's too many levels there already. Well, that's all I have for you today. It's a really small topic. What can I say? Anyway, I hope you liked this, and I'll be putting up more videos every week or so-ish. But if you like this one, you can thumbs up, which would be cool. You can subscribe, which would be really cool. And you can follow me on all those social media platforms. It's spelled the same way it's spelled here. Love ya. Bye.